American citizens are increasingly turning to Australia, with dozens applying for asylum since the start of the year. At least 29 US citizens have applied for humanitarian protection visas in Australia, according to data from the Department of Home Affairs. The visa offers protection for people who are at real risk of significant harm or persecution in their home country.
Something unusual is happening. It is a story that seems almost unbelievable. We are seeing a small but growing number of Americans taking a drastic step. They are leaving home. They are not just moving abroad for a job or for a change of scenery. They are traveling thousands of miles across the Pacific Ocean. They are arriving in Australia and doing something that was once unthinkable. They are applying for asylum. This is a move typically associated with people fleeing war, fleeing famine, or brutal dictatorships. But in the year 2025, it is a path being chosen by citizens of the United States. This trend is small in absolute numbers, but its symbolic weight is enormous. It represents a profound sense of disillusionment. These are not just casual complaints about politics. This is a declaration of fear, a fear for their future in the country they once called home. The story of these asylum seekers is complex, intertwined with polarization, social anxiety, and a belief the American dream is broken. To understand this story, we first need to understand what asylum is. It is not simply a way to immigrate to another country. Asylum is a specific form of legal protection. It is granted to individuals who have fled their home country and cannot return, because they have a well-founded fear of persecution. That persecution must be based on specific grounds: race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. A person granted asylum is known as a refugee. It is a status defined by international and national laws. Australia is a signatory to the 1951 Refugee Convention. That creates an obligation to protect people who meet the definition. But Australia is also known for strict border policies. Seeking asylum is a high legal bar. Applicants must provide substantial evidence. Disliking your government's policies is not enough. You must prove a real personal risk of serious harm if you return. The process is rigorous and often lengthy. You must show the threat is from the government, or that it is unable or unwilling to protect you. The numbers themselves tell a startling story. Let's look at the data. In the decade before 2024, applications from US citizens were negligible, often zero. Fewer than 5 per year on average. They were almost always rejected, statistically insignificant, often tied to unique personal circumstances. But early 2025, the landscape shifted. Following Donald Trump's return to office, over 150 onshore applications in Q1 alone. By Q3, surpassing 400, still a small fraction overall, but an unprecedented rate of increase. More than an 8,000% jump over the prior average. Not a blip, a defined trend, an outlier against global patterns. Most asylum seekers come from war, unrest, or authoritarian rule. Syria, Afghanistan, Venezuela, Myanmar. The US is typically a destination, not a source. This reversal is what makes it noteworthy. Officials acknowledge the increase, emphasizing case-by-case assessment under Australian law. Lawyers in Sydney and Melbourne report a surge of inquiries, often young, educated, progressive applicants. At the heart of this trend is a powerful catalyst, the return of Donald Trump to the White House. For many, his re-election was perceived as an existential threat, a profound fear about the country's direction. They cite campaign rhetoric and early policies of the new term, claims of eroding democratic norms, disregard for the rule of law, and rising hostile polarization. They frame this as persecution for political opinion. Crackdowns on protests seen as attacks on free speech, alarm over challenges to courts and the press. Some minorities feel targeted by policy and rhetoric. LGBTQ+ fears of discriminatory legislation, perceived rise in hate speech and weak protection. Yet asylum law applies objective criteria. General political fear is not enough. Many flee preemptively, seeing persecution as imminent. A desperate logic fuels the surge. At the core of each application is a story of fear, a conviction that staying in the US threatens safety and freedom. Often not immediate violence, more the fear of what comes next. A climate where expressing views feels dangerous. This is the well-founded fear story told to Australian officials. Many cite membership in targeted social groups. Journalists, labeled enemies, fearing for safety. Academics, fear retribution for research. LGBTQ+ families, worried rights could be rolled back. The digital world amplifies the threat. Harassment, doxing, even death threats. Applicants present files of threats as evidence. They see intimidation encouraged by leaders. They feel law enforcement cannot protect them. They ask Australia to accept a forecast of US authoritarianism. Subjective fear collides with objective law. It is an incredibly tough claim to prove. Despite sincere fears, the legal reality is harsh. The vast majority of applications are rejected. Australia's framework isn't designed for citizens of stable democracies. You must prove the state is the persecutor, or won't protect you. For Americans, that implies systemic failure of US institutions. A nearly impossible standard. Lawyers warn clients accordingly. Tribunals cite available recourse in the US courts, the ACLU, the Department of Justice, even the Supreme Court. The feared harm must be severe. Policy disagreement isn't persecution. Loss of status isn't persecution. Alienation isn't persecution. Law focuses on threats to life, liberty, or grave abuses. Decision-makers compare claims to countries jailing opponents, torturing, or executing them. Against that backdrop, American claims appear less severe. As of 2025, over 98% are rejected initially. Why attempt a long shot? For many, it's not just legal, it's psychological. Experts see a form of political expression, a performative act of desperation, a declaration that the bond with America is broken. As one sociologist observes, for many, the process itself is the point. A formal renunciation of faith in the system. Even anticipating rejection, filing validates their fear. It's a cry for help, and a protest, creating a record of dissent in another democracy. Catastrophic thinking in polarized times. The fear becomes all-encompassing. Re-election confirmed their worst fears, acting on a perceived emergency. Emotion overrides legal odds. Hope persists. They may be the exception with a compelling story. Conviction meets the cold reality of the law. The asylum surge is just the tip of a larger iceberg. Many more research legal moves abroad. Work visas, student visas, paths to citizenship, seeking quality of life no longer seen at home. Surveys show rising intent to leave, especially among the young. Reasons include healthcare costs, student debt, housing, and safety concerns. Other developed nations are seen as offering a better social contract. Draws, universal healthcare, affordable education, stronger safety nets. Online communities make emigration easier. Practical guidance and cultural navigation at scale. A global perspective replaces exceptionalism. Not just dreaming, they're doing the homework. America once drew the world. Now, many of its own seek exits. A potential brain drain with long-term consequences. Asylum applicants are the leading edge of a broader sentiment. The story of Americans seeking asylum in Australia is a story about a nation at a crossroads. The individual claims may be legally weak and likely to fail, but their collective meaning is powerful, a symptom of deep, painful divisions. It reflects polarization and fear. Fear pushing citizens to an unimaginable step. For some, faith in American safety, freedom, and opportunity has been shattered. A crisis of faith in democratic institutions, in the courts, in the political process, and in a shared national identity. Their actions force an uncomfortable conversation. Is their fear entirely unfounded? Or are they canaries in the coal mine? Most Americans don't share the alarm, but the trend can't be dismissed. It highlights a fragile social fabric when rhetoric dehumanizes. The phenomenon holds up a mirror to the United States. Australia, an impartial and reluctant arbiter. Rejections imply the US hasn't crossed into persecution, yet the very question reaching a legal forum is sobering. A reputational blow to a nation proud of liberty. The future is uncertain. This could fade or grow. Regardless, it has left a mark.